My faith survived the experiences in my OP, but it did not survive several years of graduate study in archaeology. Just too many contradictions between known archaeological facts and the Bible. I began studying archaeology because I wanted to use it to defend my Christian beliefs, become a professional apologist, defender of the faith, etc. But the opposite happened. Studying the facts made my beliefs die a well-deserved and long overdue death. I'm an agnostic now, much happier, and frankly, hanging out with kinder, more honest people than most, not all, of the Christians I used to hang out with. Reader comment, wait. He didn't perved with young girls, but all people care about is some affair, and he's not in jail. BTF original poster. He didn't actually perved them, at least we didn't have any evidence of it at the time. According to my OP, he would flirt with and even make suggestive comments to all of the girls in the youth group, even those in junior high. He was 40+ years old and had a wife and 3 children of his own. And then there was the touching. Never anything obvious or illegal. But he loved to put his hands all over the young ladies whenever their parents weren't around. Reader comment. This post really angered me. Baptist churches can be incredibly toxic and hypocritical. When I was a kid, I attended a Baptist church, and one of my mom's closest friends was a big leader there. She was incredibly kind and loved by everyone for many years. Then they brought in a new, younger person, like a pastor or deacon, who spoke during the service. Whatever he's called. Strangely, this guy didn't like her. My parents thought it was because she was a woman, had more experience and more authority. Before long, people turned against her, and she either left or was kicked out. It was terrible and so unfair because she was wonderful. After that, my family stopped going to that church. It just wasn't the same, and it felt like the church and all the people there were tainted afterward. It was tough because I used to really enjoy and like that church. Even though we still passed by it every day driving to school, it made me feel angry and sad. These so-called Christian people turned against one of their most beloved members because of some jerk new preacher. It still makes me sick to think about. Luckily, my mom's friend found a new job at a different church and seemed happy after that. This, along with other stories like OP's, is why I don't like or trust organized religion. It's just full of a bunch of hypocritical people who preach about God things but don't practice what they preach, and I don't want to be a part of that. Original poster. That's really sad, and I'm so sorry your friend had to go through that. The problem with a church job compared to a regular job is that you are expected to put your heart into it, and most people rightfully want to. I've been laid off from a regular job before. It was no big deal, just downsizing, so I went out and found another job. Same goes for office politics. Unpleasant, but just business. But if you work for a church, sometimes you find yourself putting your heart into it for heartless people who use your own compassion to hurt you. Reader comment. And then those same people have the audacity to call themselves godly people. Hypocrites. Original poster. In a way they are, though not in the way they intend. Belief in a cruel God makes a cruel man. Robert Ingersoll. They're just acting like the Bible God. Reader comment. Ah, there's that turn the other cheek you hear so much about from the Bible in action. Original poster. For 20 years, I turned the other cheek in that church, and you see what it got me. Sometimes you have to stand up for what's right. Reader comment. The perfect ending to a most satisfying revenge on a creep who richly deserved it. Glad you landed in archaeology. That was one of my possible career ambitions when I was a kid. Ended up a computer scientist instead. Not a bad gig. Original poster. Computers provide a lot more stability and flexibility. If you have to look for a job, there are probably lots of them near where you live, or you can relocate to lots of desirable places. And of course, the pay is great too, and you can often work remotely or from home. I love archaeology, but I'm having to face the fact that if I want to raise a family, I'm going to need more stability. If I can't find a tenure-track job at a big university, I might have to make some difficult decisions. Maybe I could do computers for money and archaeology for fun. I love archaeology, though. My career is in ruins, but I really dig it. Reader comment, thank you for this post. This just reinforces my belief that organizations like this were never about God or faith or morality, but merely a safe haven for abusers and authoritarians of all stripes. None of the so-called leaders in this post demonstrated that they were about anything other than money, influence, and the protection of the guilty. Even Fred was more interested in intimidation and subterfuge. I don't know why you'd ever want to preach for such a hypocritical organization, but I hope you look back on it now and realize how many of your principles you would have had to give up to get the position of power you craved. Original poster, thanks for the encouragement. With my career in archaeology, I am fulfilling many of the personal desires that I had hoped preaching would fulfill, discovering truth, teaching, helping people learn to think, etc. Of course, being a minister would never have fulfilled those desires. I'm just glad that I found that out before I had invested too much of my life in it. I know several guys who were not so lucky. Imagine being 50 years old, with a wife and kids, then discovering that you've been making a living from a lie your entire life, and that you have no marketable skills without except lying for a living. Of course, you've been lied to, and you could stop lying and force your whole family to undergo enormous financial and social hardship. But what do you do with the rest of your life? So it could have been a lot worse. Reader comment, oh my gosh. I laughed so hard when I read, any Baptist will tell you that it is the kiss of death to even be suspected of being a liberal. It's so true. I was raised Baptist and so was my husband, and we got a good kick out of that. I'm so sorry for the hurt you endured, but I'm glad you came out stronger and, it sounds to me, a better person. Good luck with the rest of your life. Original poster, thank you. Life is so much better now that I'm not depending on a non-existent guy to run it. Reader comment, that's good. I knew a guy like that too, and their whole family still gives me anxiety when I see them. I didn't get my revenge on them, but I pray for justice for all every day, so I know at some point I'll get it. Original poster, living well is the best revenge. Although I freely admit that I did want to get revenge on Mr. Charming, I also wanted to stop him from hurting a lot of people in my church. Original poster, I did get some sadistic satisfaction from what Fred and I did, but honestly, it was not as personally gratifying as I had hoped. The main thing that all this accomplished was to expose to me the blatant hypocrisy and cruelty of people in my former church, whom I loved deeply and served faithfully, but had only pretended to love me because it enabled them to use me for their own selfish purposes. Exposing Mr. Charming was not the most healing thing in this whole sordid mess. The most personally healing thing that I did was getting myself out of the toxic environment of Christianity. Reader comment, A. This is literally my favorite revenge story. B. Mr. Charming is, based on my own reading and interpretation of the Bible, not a Christian as far as living like Christ goes, and he's way off the mark. Heck, the description almost places him on false prophet C. Don't we all just loathe Bible thumpers? D. I do sincerely hope that this experience didn't ruin church in general for you. I can understand why it did. I mean, Pastor T and Mr. Charming are complete assholes. Original poster. Actually, it did not seriously damage my faith. The Bible warns about false prophets, hypocrites, etc. But it did make me start thinking, something is wrong here. Because I had trusted my church, its ministers, and my denomination to tell me the truth. So I started looking deeply at the evidence for Christianity. This was what I'd been planning to do all along, because my career goal was to go to minister's school and become an ordained minister and professional Christian apologist, defender of the faith. This deep examination of the historical, archaeological, and scientific evidence, combined with an honest reading of all the self-contradictions in the Bible, which was most damaging of all, forced me to conclude that all of Christianity's claims are demonstrably false. It's not a close call, it's very clearly bogus. It's actually worse than that. Church and denominational leaders are deliberately lying, and they know it. But hey, it's a great way to make a fast buck. I am now a very happy agnostic. Reader comment, great revenge. Though I wonder what happened to Fred and his wife. Did they stay together? Original poster. Fred and his wife had a very complicated situation. There was a lot of pain on both sides because his wife had committed adultery repeatedly for a long time. Plus, Fred's wife had led him to believe that Mr. Charming had left the state when, in fact, he was less than an hour's drive away, leading Fred to doubt his wife's promises that she had stopped seeing him. On the other side, there was Fred sending embarrassing photos and videos to so many people, an obvious act of vindictiveness. Fred truly loved his wife, however, and blamed Mr. Charming much more than her for her infidelities. Also, they had children to think about. They decided to continue marriage counseling. Fred also helped her go back to school and get a master's degree in education, which enabled her to teach and did a lot to rebuild her self-esteem. With all that revenge porn floating around, they figured that she probably should not risk teaching at an elementary or high school, so she teaches at a nearby state community college, whose administration knows about it and doesn't care. I talked with Fred a few weeks ago before I posted our story on Reddit to be sure that he was okay with what I said in my post. At that time they were still married, and Fred said they were both happy. Reader comment, man, I'm surprised Fred still trusts his wife after that. I don't think it's the cheating itself that hurts, but the constant stream of lies. Can't really blame Fred for being vindictive, though. Original poster. It took a long time to rebuild that trust. Forgiveness is given, trust is earned, and once trust has been broken, it is very difficult to build it back again. But you're right, Fred has to be the most loving, forgiving guy in the world. I'd have kicked her out, gotten full custody of my children, and done everything in my power to keep me and my kids away from her. I think that the key is that Fred blamed Mr. Charming. There's a lot of other stuff that Fred and I found out about Mr. Charming that I didn't put in my OP because it was already too long. Mr. Charming did have quite a history. The truly disturbing part is that the denomination knew about most of it. They just kept shuffling him from church to church, putting children and even adult ladies at risk, and they didn't care. He was very good at raising money, and that was all that mattered. Reader comment. There are actually techniques online on how to get married women to sleep with you. It's a series of manipulation techniques, pretty much. It's really messed up, but if you read it, you can see how and why it works. Obviously, not all women fall for this, but the ones that do are usually going through a rough patch where communication isn't the best. While I think cheating can be potentially forgiven, I don't think most men can get over seeing their wife get plowed by another man while married to him. That shit's fucked up, man. And yeah, the church tends to go with the forgiveness route. I grew up in a church myself. The head pastor, who I've known since I was a little boy, ended up sleeping with a girl my age, who was around 17 at that time. Most people just forgave him after a few months. Even the girl's father did. The guy even attended her engagement party. Moreover, he still receives promotions and is now one of the leaders in one of the biggest Bible colleges in the area. Original poster. In my experience, Christian groups' forgiveness is very selective. In the example in my post, I wasn't forgiven. I was kicked out of a church I loved for fake reasons I still don't understand. But the minister of Fred's church openly lied on a very positive letter of recommendation that he gave Mr. Charming when my former church was considering hiring him. Fred had informed him about Mr. Charming's adulteries shortly after the meeting between Fred and Mr. Charming, as described in my OP. The pastor of Fred's church was willing to let a known adulterer have unsupervised access to all of the young people in my former church's youth group. Yet he is still the pastor of Fred's former church. Fred and his wife left, by the way, and are attending a more liberal Methodist church. Reader comment, my friend, this is worthy of a movie. Literally, this is the plot of a classic revenge movie and feels like something out of The Count of Monte Cristo. Original poster. Well, The Count of Monte Cristo made a lot of money off of everything. I, on the other hand, passed up the chance to become a minister, which means selling my soul to make a sweet income with almost no effort. All I would have had to do was lie through my teeth every Sunday morning and ruin the lives of people who loved and trusted me just to make a lot of money. Lying for a living didn't appeal to me, so I chose archaeology instead. Everything is peer-reviewed, so the incentives for a successful career are quite different from those of professional Christians. Reader comment, and churches, religions wonder why more and more young people are leaving. Most people with eyes and a nose and a brain can see that something stinks. Original poster. The weird part is that the church youth, high school and college, including me but also many others, had Mr. Charming figured out as soon as they saw him. It was not subtle. He had the look. Imagine the faces of Kenneth Copeland and Jim Bakker merged together with the creepiest characteristics of both. But the deacons who hired him thought he was God's gift. Reader comment. Sounds about right with the average church groups. They are super nice when you're all up in their friend circle, and toxic just short of literally the KKK to anyone that isn't. Original poster. One of the nicest things about me leaving that church, and eventually leaving Christianity altogether, was that it showed me who my true friends were. My true friends stuck by me no matter what I believed or didn't believe. The rest were never really my friends. Reader comment. It's funny how the most caring people I've met were either agnostic or not religious at all. Religion can be a powerful tool for manipulation and control, and its promoters are well aware of that. Choosing archaeology was a much better path. Original poster. That was exactly my experience. According to my Christian leaders, anyone who didn't agree with their beliefs was considered evil. However, once I left, I was pleasantly surprised to discover that there were people in the world, lots of them, who treated others with respect and compassion without any God telling them to do so. They were just good people because it was the right thing to do, even when no one was watching. It took me some time to get used to it. I kept thinking, why are they being so nice to me? What do they want? When are they going to start being mean? Because so many Christians had been nice to me just to hurt me more when they revealed their true selves. It's the Christians who were hateful and spiteful, even to people they claimed to love. Not all Christians. Some are good people. But unfortunately, too many are just terrible, even to people like me who are trying to be generous and kind to them. Belief in a cruel God makes a cruel man. Robert Ingersoll. Reader comment, carrying similar scars. Glad you got to see your rainbow in this shitstorm, OP. Original poster. Mr. Charming didn't really hurt me. I and every one of my friends in the church's college and youth groups knew he was a sociopath the moment we saw him. But it was extremely painful to be rejected by Pastor T, whom I loved and respected at least as much as my own parents, and many other people in the church whom I loved as much as my own family, especially the viciousness of the rumors, which had no basis in fact and were just pure meanness. I thought they loved me. That hurt a lot, more than words can describe. I don't know that anyone ever really gets over such a huge quantity of that kind of pain. But I have moved on to a new life, better career, archaeology instead of ministry, new theology, atheist, agnostic, and lots of better friends, academics and scientists instead of phony Christians, although I'm continuing to keep my good friendships with my real friends from my former life. You really have to be deep into Christianity, then get completely out of it, to fully understand just how damaging it is to everything that is human within you. I can now be fully human. Reader comment. Did you happen to notice a ring still on his finger? Original poster. Fred is still married. It has taken them a long time, and a lot of marriage counseling, to rebuild trust. Fred blames Mr. Charming for his wife's infidelities. Apparently, she has been faithful to Fred since then. Fred has got to be one of the kindest, most loving guys I've ever met. I'd have divorced her. I don't know if Mr. Charming is still married or not. His wife is so bitter and spiteful that I'm not sure which would be worse for him. Divorce with alimony and child support, or staying married. Either way, I hope he's as thoroughly unhappy as he tried to make everyone else. My experience with Pastor T made me feel like being a minister was the last thing I wanted to do. I just didn't want to be like him, phony, vindictive, shallow, selfish, arrogant, deceitful, using people, etc. That door was closed to me anyway because Pastor T knows practically everyone who is anyone in my former denomination. He would have ruined any chance I might have had of ever getting a job as a minister. I had loved Pastor T as much as I had loved my own parents, but because of my love for him, I was blinded to seeing him for what he was until the events in my original post. Then I simply put together all of the things that I had kept myself from seeing for so many years, and it was a huge enlightener for me. I was still a Bible-believing Christian at that time, so I saw archaeology as a way of becoming a professional Christian apologist, a person who defends the claims of Christianity using science, etc. I had taken enough basic science, biology, etc. to fulfill the admission requirements for most PhD archaeology programs. My PhD program at a state university in the Midwest did not discuss biblical archaeology, but after a year or so, I started applying my newly learned skills to investigating the archaeological basis for my beliefs by reading everything I could find about biblical archaeology. This took me a year or two because I spent enormous amounts of my free time on this investigation. My study convinced me that the only honest thing to do was to let go of my former beliefs. There was zero evidence supporting the truth of Genesis through Judges and substantial evidence against it. The accounts of Samuel, Chronicles, Kings, etc. appeared highly embellished, especially the parts before King Hezekiah, like those about David and Solomon, which contradicted archaeological findings. Extensive research has been done on this topic due to the widespread interest in Judaism, Christianity, and the Bible. The tons of evidence unearthed make it highly unlikely that someone will discover anything casting doubt on it. The blatant dishonesty of Christian apologists troubled me. Most seemed more interested in deceit than truth. They compiled questionable arguments, asserted them as evidence, and manipulated their audience's egos by suggesting they were smarter than non-Christian experts, all while seeking and obtaining significant financial support from their deceived followers. However, I discovered a passion for archaeology and enjoyed working with like-minded people. Although my beliefs underwent a deserved demise, I'm content with my decision to become an archaeologist. I'm now a happy atheist agnostic. In my opinion, the Epic of Gilgamesh, EOG, is a more compelling story than Beowulf. The latter may not present the full story or the best version due to centuries of editing by a pervasively Christian culture, while EOG was preserved safely in clay tablets under mounds of dirt. Recent years have seen the Christian right in the USA using their beliefs to justify various unsavory actions. If we survive this period, I believe it will lead many from the Millennial and Generation Z cohorts to reject Christianity, particularly its dominant form in the USA, due to its blatant hypocrisy. Alternatively, if the Christian right prevails, the USA may plunge into another dark ages, possibly irrecoverable. Reader comment: It really bothers me that Fred sent out intimate videos of his wife, especially since they were getting counseling and trying to rebuild their relationship. I understand she cheated, but this seems like revenge porn. Original poster, I agree. Fred was emotionally distraught, to say the least, probably not thinking clearly. I won't judge him. If my wife had cheated like that, I don't know how I would have reacted. Was Fred so consumed by a desire for revenge that he shared embarrassing photos and videos just to get back at Mr. Charming, and maybe even her? Or did he intentionally want to make her realize the extent of the hurt and degradation, hoping to kickstart the process of rebuilding and healing their marriage? I've never asked him that. We're not close enough friends for that kind of question, but it's a valid question, I think. Reader comment: It's always heartbreaking to hear stories of how the actions of church leaders turn people away from the church when its main mission should be to reach out to people. We're called to go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Matthew 28:19 ESV. And we can't do that when we shut people out. Original poster. Actually, I remained a conservative Christian after all the events in my post. Then I started grad school, pursuing a PhD in archaeology. Although my grad school was at a state university and didn't focus on biblical archaeology, I learned a lot. Applying those skills to the Bible's reliability made my beliefs much more liberal. I still appreciate some of Jesus' teachings like love your neighbor, but I draw the line when he suggests the earth is flat. Luke 4:5. Reader comment. Some people hope to find archaeological evidence to support their scriptures, like Book of Mormon archaeologists. I'm open-minded, liberal on some things, conservative on others. I believe in an infinitely first cause, but don't see credible evidence it writes books or creates fan clubs for itself. Original poster. Asimov's Guide to the Bible had a big impact on me. It's based mostly on the Anchor Bible, a 20-plus volume set that provides more in-depth insights. Spoiler alert. If you believe in a literal Adam, Abraham, Moses, Joshua, etc., and want to keep that belief, avoid the Anchor Bible. Reader comment. Congratulations on choosing archaeology. I'm a geologist. It's a much better path than any religious one. My girlfriend is a pastor's daughter, and from first-hand experience I've heard stories that churches are like cults, full of manipulative and judgmental people who only care about themselves. Original poster. Archaeology is a lot of fun. I get to dig in the dirt, get paid for it, and write papers about it. I present them at conferences, and my friends go, "Ooh, ah, wow." The only challenge is that the USA has few archaeological sites, but I love traveling to Europe whenever I have 3 to 6 months free. In Europe, it feels like you could dig about a foot deep almost anywhere and find something interesting. It's a slight exaggeration, but only slight. Reader comment. I haven't had that experience. I work for an environmental company that conducts archaeological surveys, and I've worked on some of those. They seem to come up pretty often. Original poster. I agree that there are some fascinating Native American sites and colonial America sites in the USA. I just prefer Roman, Celtic, etc. Reader comment. Holy smokes. I truly am at a loss for words for that whole situation. The church is meant to be a welcoming and loving home for those who are hurting, and your church showed no attributes of that. I hope all is well with you now. I am a Christian, and I still believe God loves you deeply, even though I don't know where you stand with him right now. God bless. Original poster. My faith survived the experiences in my post, but it did not survive several years of graduate study in archaeology. There were too many contradictions between known archaeological facts and the Bible. I started studying archaeology to defend my Christian beliefs and become a professional apologist, defender of the faith. But the opposite happened. Studying the facts led to my beliefs dying a well-deserved and long overdue death. I'm an agnostic now, much happier, and frankly hanging out with kinder, more honest people than most, not all, of the Christians I used to hang out with. Reader comment. I really wish you had purchased a magazine from him. Make him make change for you and possibly tip him 2 bits, just for old time's sake. Sorry, but I have an odd idea about revenge sometimes. Great story. Original poster. I have a policy that whenever I feel the uncontrollable urge to choke the living daylights out of someone, I just sit there and do nothing but stare. Honestly, I had convinced myself that the gene pool did not need that POS, and that I would be doing a public service by feeling the gratifying crunch of his throat collapsing under my grip. But the bus station was filled with witnesses who didn't know him like I did, and I was pretty sure that someone would try to stop me before asphyxiation had its desired, permanent effect. Then there was the possibility of 20 years to life, and the fact that I wasn't completely certain that I could come up with a "he needed killing" defense that would convince a jury. Nice thought, though. Rub the poser's nose in it. Hey, Mr. Charming, does this porn star look like your wife? Sweet. Reader comment. I understood everything except the bus station part. Why do people not like a bus station? Original poster. I did not intend to convey any like or dislike for the bus station, although some other commenters have. I simply described it as it was, smelly, crowded, etc. Many bus stations are located in economically depressed parts of town, frequented by panhandlers, etc. I don't pay much attention to that kind of thing, and I have many fond memories of many bus trips, vacation tours, etc. But that would explain why many people don't like bus stations. Reader comment. Don't churches check for references when hiring? Original poster. They're supposed to check references. And in the case of Mr. Charming and my former church, the pastor of Fred's church wrote a glowing letter of recommendation for Mr. Charming, which was a big factor in my former church hiring him. After all this blew up at my former church, it came out that somebody had informed Fred's pastor about Mr. Charming's adulteries shortly after Fred and his friends met with Mr. Charming, described in my OP. So the pastor of Fred's church lied through his teeth just so that he could offload his problem employee onto another church. Fred told me that there was a big stink about it at his church, but last I heard, the guy was still pastor at Fred's church. Telling the truth is not a prerequisite to being a minister. Reader comment. So were your parents nowhere involved in your travails? And why was Pastor T making common cause with Mr. Charming if Mr. Charming was after his job? Original poster. My dad works all the time and has never had time for me. Mom had a falling out with Pastor T a couple of years before, so basically she told me, I warned you about that creep. So they were physically nearby, but psychologically not really there during my whole ordeal. I still can't figure out Pastor T's reaction. I love that POS as much as my own dad. He was the reason I'd answered the call to ministry. I was as perfect a good little boy as anyone could ask for. Eagle Scout, while at the same time doing children's church, bus ministry, pre-ministry major at a denominational college, etc. Then when the wind changed, and I needed him the most, he turned against me for no reason. I've never been so badly hurt. Demanded complete devotion from me, which I gave him. He never gave a damn about me. I was disposable. Reader comment makes me want to become one of those good Christian folk, none of whom, including the OP, come out of this story without the smell of shit about them. Original poster. I eliminated the power of a person who was destroying people's lives simply by exposing his deeds. The truth. If there is a God, and if there is a judgment day, I am completely comfortable standing before God and explaining my behavior. You will not be so self-righteous when something similar happens to you. I think that Fred just got irrational after he found out that Mr. Charming had moved only 50 miles away. That's less than an hour's drive from his wife. There is also the question of whether Fred's wife knew where Mr. Charming was, and did not disclose that to Fred, which would raise suspicions about whether she had completely ended the relationship or was still hiding information from Fred. He didn't know where Mr. Charming was until the Sunday morning when I first met him and told him. As I stated in my OP, his hatred of Mr. Charming was still fulminating. Like Mount St. Helens a few minutes before the explosion, he presented such a face of restrained rage and vindictiveness that it scared me, and I wasn't even the one he was mad at. So maybe he just lost control of himself for a while, then calmed down later. I've never asked him. Last time I talked with Fred a few months ago, he and his wife were still together. He has forgiven her, and they had several years of counseling to rebuild trust. Forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. Forgiveness is given, trust is earned. Once trust is broken, it takes a lot of work to build it back again. They're still working on it. I hope they make it. It's been 6-7 years, so their odds are good. Reader comment. Sure, it's much easier to believe they're secretly Satanists than the idea there could be horrible people in the religion, right? Original poster. If Mr. Charming was a secret Satanist, he certainly hid it well. He had a Master of Music Ministry, or some similar title, from one of the denomination's largest and most well-respected ministers' schools. He had attended churches all his life and worked for several of them. His wife and children were some of the most rigidly biblical literalist Christians I've ever met.